Santiago Manwin Valera is a prominent member of the Awajan indigenous community in the Peruvian Amazon, who have occupied and relied on their territory for millennia. Santiago himself has been recognized internationally for his commitment to the environment and human rights. In 2009, he was shot, almost fatally, by the Peruvian army during an epic confrontation over industrial exploitation of native lands. 5 years later, he is still undergoing medical treatment, and he's forbidden to leave Peru. Charges may or may not be pending. He's a pacifist, a devout Christian, and a founder of the Jesuit Social Center in his community. A bit of background. In 2008, Peru entered into a free trade agreement with the United States that entitled foreign companies to extract oil, gas, and lumber from the Peruvian Amazon. To implement the agreement, the government of then-President Alan Garcia, with the assent of Congress, issued a number of enabling decrees without consulting the indigenous people of the region. One of the decrees, in fact, withdrew the requirement that extractive firms acquire informed consent from local communities before beginning their activities. The indigenous peoples protested, but the government was immovable. The crisis arrived after a full year of declared opposition, followed by 65 days of civil disobedience, including the blockade of a major highway by as many as 5,000 indigenous and other local people. Other protesters had captured a Petroperu pumping station, along with the badly equipped police who were guarding it. On June 5, 2009, the army attacked the highway protesters. That attack triggered a counterattack at the pumping station. The official death toll is 23 police officers, 5 indigenous people, and 5 other civilians. But the indigenous community contends that the army dumped about 40 indigenous bodies into a river where they were swept away. More than 150 people were wounded. What you're about to hear is Santiago Manwin's account of what happened, why it happened, what he experienced personally, and how it could all have been avoided. Tell me about Santiago. Tell me about where Santiago comes from and what his life is like, a little bit.
Cuéntame un poco acerca de Santiago. ¿Quién es Santiago? ¿Cómo ha sido su vida?
Bueno, Santiago, pues yo nací.
I was born in the province of Condorcanqui. I am from the Awajún ethnic group. There are 2 very large groups in our area, the Awajún people and the Wampis. Our ancestors were famously descended from the Jivaro, Shuar people. I was born and educated in our lands, thanks to the Jesuits in our area. So, this is how I learned to speak Spanish. My strength has been my indigenous spirituality, the Awajún cosmology. And from this cosmology, through study, I have accepted the evangelization of the New World of the Catholic faith. I am a Catholic, and thus my work has been to understand how the ministry relates to the Awajún, where God is speaking directly to my people. So God is present. God, the Ajota, we say, takes responsibility for the contemporary Awajún, just as Jesus did for humanity. So I build this spirituality with our traditional God, together with Jesus entering human history. This allows the contemporary union of these 2 cultures, the Christian alongside the traditions of our ancestors. The ancient God must be present with us now, accompanying us in our lives. With the emergence of Christianity, the New World is born, and in this new world, God is with us. This has been a source of strength for me, so that when facing life's struggles, I can follow this vision of Jesus. If you follow Jesus, you must fight. One must fight for one's education, health, and land. God has not created the world so that other men can destroy it. We must manage and use it in accordance with our own needs. For us, the Western man destroys. All of nature is money. He doesn't see the beauty. The Western man does not have this love of nature. The more he destroys it, the more he extracts money from it, the more he calls it development. This development takes strength away from men, who end up as beggars, because everything is taken away from them that they need to live. They have to go to the city, and they don't benefit from this so-called development. For an indigenous person from the Amazon, the image of nature is one that is integral to humans. We are not separate entities. We need nature to live, to develop as people. Nature assures that humans achieve a balance in accordance with their needs, so that they can achieve buen vivir. Contemporary versions of this idea are called sustainability, sustainable development. The Awajún people are rooted in these values. Therefore, with this crisis, we have to defend our livelihood and our land. Because nature supports us, we have to defend nature. It is our source of survival. Since I have internalized this, I have dedicated myself to defending the environment, understanding that humans are important because they are part of creation. When President Alan Garcia's government introduced legislation supporting projects that were very absurd, the indigenous people had to oppose it because the projects were destructive. It would have been suicide to allow them to go forward. The education that I have had has taught me that struggle is permanent. This permanent struggle involves our defense of nature and nature's continued support for us. This is the image of God's creation. It is not a God of money or who knows what. The true God exists in this image. Our indigenous cosmology requires us to respect and revere nature, not destroy it. This is more or less my perspective.
Tell me about buen vivir.
Para nosotros,
For us, the concept of buen vivir is living without money, but also without needing that money. You can eat, fish, hunt, you can have children, and you can find a way to drink something. You don't die from hunger, since all your needs are met from nature. Nature provides everything. The limits are set by the forest. You enter and say, I need some of this, a little of that. I'll take that palm. You gather what you need and take it home to eat. In the past, there was no need for money. But now, money has become important for educating children. So we have to find another way to sustainably use nature in order to generate the necessary income. Now, there are motorized vehicles that we need to buy in order to take our products to market. People sell their plantains, their yucca, their wood. People need to participate in the market economy, and they are growing cacao to earn income. So money has entered the subsistence culture, but not excessively. No one has become rich. But money helps us so that you can address pressing needs. The Awajún people have had all of these needs met, but today the community is in crisis because communal lands are being reduced, privatized. People are migrating, and there is competition for resources. What our ancestors so successfully did in distributing resources for Buen Vivir, but without hunting, fishing, and gathering. It's a way of living that at the moment we are developing through reforestation. Farming melons, new forest products, finding ways to obtain sufficient income to support health and families. This is Buen Vivir for the Awajún. Finding new ways to maintain balance in modern conditions. In this critical moment, it is very important. There are organizations that work with the indigenous people so that the indigenous people can truly find Buen Vivir.
Is it fair to say that Buen Vivir is based on the idea that there's such a thing as enough, and when you have that, you should not be looking for more?
At the moment, that is the way it works for the Awajún people. So that no one is superior to anyone else economically, socially, or politically. We share all the basic necessities of life. So no one in my community is wealthy or economically superior. There is equality among the majority. The teacher, who earns a salary, shares it with relatives and everyone eats. Anyone who earns money shares with others, providing education for some, health for others. Our contributions are complementary. Sometimes you travel. Economic divisions because of money have not occurred in our community.
Earlier on, you said that you felt you were facing suicide in 2009. Tell me how that felt. What was that?
Legislation that was pending was going to wipe out the indigenous community. This legislation was drafted without consulting us. If these decree laws had been implemented, the land would have been sold to multinational corporations. This was insulting to indigenous peoples, since the land they occupy in the Amazon is forest. And if you look, you see forest, forest and more forest. It looks like it will never end.
habiendo riquezas grandes. Pero los indígenas que viven años,
The people who have lived there
que
for
han vivido, tras
generations
años que han vivido,
understand
ven
that
que
the
esa-
forest is
esa-
not
esta inmensa
viable as
naturaleza
agricultural
no
land.
sirven para tierras agrícolas.
It is
Son
floodplain
tierras de
and very
inundaciones,
poor quality that does
son
not
pocos,
support
porque
crop
la
production.
tierra es pobre.
If you clear the
el bosque,
forest,
si tú le
the
quitas
land
todo el
becomes
bosque,
arid.
La tierra entra en
The
erupción
people who live in the forest
en una
understand
tierra árida que
this.
se podría convertirse, y entonces los indígenas, las personas que viven ahí, ¿dónde irían? ¿No? Entonces por eso el desarrollo
The
que
development
diseña
plans
Lima,
that the
el gobierno,
government designs
muchas veces
are not
no es
compatible
compatible
with
con la
our
realidad
reality.
nuestra.
They want to
O sea,
impose
que ellos
a
quieren
development model
imponer
in accordance
un
with their
desarrollo de
ideas.
acuerdo a su mentalidad, pero no consultan al indígena
But they
cómo tú
don't
quieres
consult with the indigenous
ver el desarrollo,
population
cómo quieres
about
desarrollar.
what they want and how they
Entonces,
want
nosotros años
development to
hemos
take
visto
place.
dónde estaría el
We have
desarrollo y
been
cómo
trying
podemos
to
desarrollar.
communicate to the government
Y ese desarrollo
our
que
view
queremos
of appropriate
es lo que le
development
proponemos al Estado
for
y el Estado
years, but they
no
do
capta
not
ese
get
mensaje
it.
que nosotros damos. Por ejemplo, para el Estado, el petróleo es la riqueza grande que hay que explotar.
For
Ahora
example,
con toda la tecnología de
for
la
the
punta no va a
state,
dañar a la
oil represents
naturaleza,
great
al
wealth
ambiente.
that they wish to exploit.
Pero de alguna forma,
But this can't be done
cuando yo tengo
without
que cazar
destroying
un
nature.
armadillo,
What I
tengo
know
que hacer
from
huequito.
hunting
Ese
armadillo
hueco
is that
desfigura.
if you put a hole in it, it
Como
dies.
un petrolero que va
If
a trabajar
petroleum
70 años,
interests want to drill a well, they have to
¿cómo
make
no
a
va a
hole in the
dañar
ground. How can this be done without
¿cómo se llama?
causing
La tierra.
harm to the earth?
¿Dónde van a ir los residuos? Con toda la
Where is the
contaminación que
waste
hemos
going
visto,
to go?
aunque sea con la tecnología de la punta que tú puedes hablar, tú a la naturaleza no
With
puedes
all the
controlar.
current technology that they might talk
A
about,
veces hay
you cannot control
¿cómo se
what the
llama?
impacts will
Inesperadamente que
be
a veces
on nature.
accidentes que realmente
There
ahí
will be accidents.
el que se
This is
fastidia
what
son
upsets
los
the
grupos
indigenous
indígenas que viven en esta
population.
tierra, ¿no? Entonces, esos decretos no eran favorables para nosotros. Y fue sencillo.
So
nuestra
this
protesta.
legislation was not favorable to
Nuestra
us.
protesta era exigir
Our
al
protest
gobierno
was simple.
y al Congreso
Our protest
de que se derogue
was to
esos
demand
decretos
that the government
y que
and the Congress
vayamos a la mesa de
repeal
diálogo
those
a
laws,
trabajar
and
verdaderamente
that we sit down
cómo es que nosotros
to
queremos
negotiate
el
the type of
desarrollo para la
development
Amazonía.
that will be best
todos
for
los
the
indígenas.
Amazon basin,
Entonces,
with all
ese
the
trabajo
indigenous people
es lo que
involved.
el gobierno debía
Thus,
recoger el reflejo
this
de los
work
trabajos
would
nuestros
inform the
para
government's
poder
planning for
planificar, decir,
development.
en la selva hay que hacer esto,
The
lo que piden
government
los
should
indígenas, de
say,
esta forma hay que
we will
diseñar
do
el
this in
trabajo.
the Amazon, as
Este
the
sería
indigenous people
un gobierno
indicate it
dialogante.
is how it should be
Pero
done.
este gobierno no quiso
We
dialogar.
hoped for a government that was
Entonces,
open to dialogue,
¿cómo se llama?
but this government did not
Empezó
want
a
to
insultarnos de
negotiate.
que éramos perros
Instead,
del
they
hortelano,
derided us
de que
as
éramos
dogs in the manger.
ciudadanos
They
de
called us
tercera categoría,
third-class
en
citizens.
fin. Y que realmente no se puede tocar la selva porque están los espíritus de nuestros antepasados. No vamos a ese extremo. Es que no
We
es que,
are
no es que
not
nosotros no
saying
vamos a
that you cannot
decir
touch
que
the
en
forest
ese cerro
because
no
my
se puede tocar
father
porque
is
está mi
resting
padre ahí.
there.
No es eso.
It is
más
much
profundo que
deeper
eso,
than
¿no?
that.
O sea que nuestra espiritualidad
Our spirituality is
Adán
embedded
García
in the
tocó esa parte,
forest.
tocó sin
It is
conocer mucho.
an integral part of
La
nature,
espiritualidad
the face
está
of
ahí,
God.
¿cómo se llama?
nature.
La cara de Dios.
If you harm
creación.
that, we lose
Si
our
dañamos
balance
ese,
and don't know where to
eh,
go.
nosotros perdemos el equilibrio.
This is what happened to
El
the
indígena no
Incas,
sabe dónde ir.
who lost all their rights,
Así como los
They
incas que perdieron
subjugated
todo su
them,
derecho.
took their lands and their
Se entregaron,
treasures.
quitaron la tierra,
The
quitaron sus
Quechua
tesoros,
people live on.
viven
but
los indígenas,
defeated.
¿no? Con sus quechos, toda esa parte.
We don't
dominados.
want that outcome.
Nosotros no queremos llegar a ese
We
nivel.
want development
Nosotros
that
queremos
preserves
encontrar
balance.
un desarrollo,
And if there are oil
equilibrado,
resources to be
pero dentro de
exploited,
nuestra zona.
it must
Entonces,
occur
si hay
in a
petróleo,
way that is
pues hay que asegurarnos que
beneficial
hay que
to
sacar la
indigenous
riqueza del
people.
petróleo y el dinero
But how can the
que favorezca al
extraction
grupo
be
indígena, pero
accomplished
¿cómo
in a way
sacamos
that
sin dañar,
assures that
sin
where we
perjudicar
live won't be
el ambiente
harmed?
donde nosotros
We
vivimos?
can't go live in
Porque nosotros
Canada
no vamos a
or the
vivir
United
a
States.
Canadá ni a
We'll
Estados
still
Unidos.
live here.
Viviremos en nuestra zona ahí.
If they ruin our
Entonces, si nos
lands
dañan
by
ese-
extracting
por
oil,
sacar el petróleo,
pollute our
toda
water,
el agua, todos
where are we
los
going to
trabajos
go?
desechos que botan, ¿dónde iremos nosotros?
So, That's why I
Entonces, por eso
said
era un
that
suicidio
we should be committing suicide if we
aceptar
allowed
esos
that
decretos
legislation
legislativos
to go
y
forward,
protestamos de que realmente
and we
se
protested
deroguen esos
against it.
decretos.
Because
por
of
esa
that
protesta,
protest, the
El
government
gobierno
wanted to
quiso
teach
dar
us a
un
lesson,
escarmiento,
but they did so
pero sin
without
conocer nuestra
considering our
trayectoria
history.
histórica. El pueblo abajún empieza.
The Hibaro group of Awahun people are descendants of warriors who cut off heads.
Cortadores de cabeza y reductores.
In this conflict, they surrounded us.
En ese enfrentamiento, encerrado, usted va a encerrar aquí un gato, lo vas a golpear.
Like a trapped cat, the cat has to defend itself, either by fighting or finding a means of escape.
Eso fue. A nosotros nos encierran y tuvimos que enfrentarnos.
That's what happened.
O sea que si a mí realmente me han dado una
The
instrucción, una
government
formación
forces
religiosa, la
surrounded
vida hay
us,
que defender.
and we had to fight back.
La vida
My
no se
religious
entrega a tiempo.
education taught me that you must defend life.
La
You
selva no se vende,
don't
la
sell
selva se
the
defiende.
forest. You protect
Entonces,
it.
Si ese maestro Jesús, el Ajuta, Dios de mis antepasados,
So, as the teacher
muere en una
Jesus
cruz,
died on the cross,
muere porque
he
defiende una
died
vida,
defending life.
defiende
He
el
died
derecho.
defending
la
human
persona
rights.
Entonces,
The
el Abajún
Awahun have to
tiene que
defend their
defender
lives to
vida.
ensure the rights of future
la
generations.
generación que va a venir más allá tiene que estar asegurada. Entonces,
If this cannot be done
ese aseguramiento,
amicably, then it
si no es
has
a
to
las
happen
buenas,
through
pues
tears.
tenemos que sacarnos lágrimas como sea, ¿no? Y entonces,
We
eso fue.
also taught the government a
realmente.
lesson. Although we
Nosotros también le
lost,
dimos nuestro
the state
escarmiento, aunque
learned.
perdimos, pero dimos su escarmiento al gobierno, al Estado. O sea que todo el
That
pueblo
all
no es
people
igual.
are not equal. That is
Entonces la
unacceptable.
respuesta fue ese, ¿no? Cuando dos truenos cargados,
When two strong
chocan,
weather systems collide,
hay relámpagos
there
y
is
truenos
lightning
fuertes.
and thunder. This
Eso es
is
lo
what
que sucedió,
happened.
el impacto que dio
The conflict in Peru.
en Perú dio al mundo.
They said that the Awahun are violent,
Los
that the
Awahun
Awahun kill.
Nosotros no matamos porque queremos. Nosotros perdí, yo gente. 5 indígenas murieron y yo fui herido gravemente.
But we didn't kill because we wanted to.
Y por eso estoy aquí en Lima,
5
tengo que
indigenous people
quedarme,
were killed, and
eh,
I was
entonces,
seriously
posiblemente
wounded,
volver a Lima
which
y-
is why I am
y
here in
entonces,
Lima.
mi vida está
I needed to receive
maltrecho.
medical attention since my life is
Pero-
badly damaged.
Esa, ¿cómo se llama?
Christ's response,
Comunicación de Dios.
which corresponds to my Awahun
que yo
spirituality
junto
as
con
well,
con mi espiritualidad Abajún,
is that we will
hace que
not
realmente
accept abuse.
nosotros respondamos.
If someone has to
No vamos
die
a
in
aceptar
self-defense,
el abuso.
it is much better than
Si
allowing
alguien tiene que
oneself
perder
to
la
be
vida
killed.
defendiendo, es mucho más mejor que alguien tiene que morir. Y entonces, bueno, Cristo murió pacíficamente, no se dejó, porque era solo, quizás no tenía
Of
que.
the 4,800
Éramos
indigenous
nosotros
people who
4,800
protested
hombres,
against the
y de
government
ese
and were
4,800
attacked by
hombres,
the army,
5 indígenas.
5 died.
Y ahí nos llevamos la vida.
The mistake that
El
the
error
government
del gobierno
and Congress made
y de los congresistas.
was that they didn't understand that the stance
No
they
entendieron.
took
Desde
led the
esa
Awahun to change
postura,
their strategy for fighting.
El Abajún cambia su estrategia de lucha. Ahora tenemos que estar en los planes del
Now we
gobierno,
have to be part of
después de la mesa
government
del diálogo que se
plans.
construye,
After the
nosotros
results
tenemos que
gained
estar
at the negotiating
en el
table,
Congreso,
we
en los
have to be
gobiernos
in
regionales,
Congress, in
tenemos que
regional
ser
governments.
alcaldes indígenas,
We need
tenemos que ser
indigenous mayors,
gobernadores,
governors.
ocupar puestos para ayudar al gobierno. A ver
We
si
need to
algún día
occupy
entiende
positions
nuestra
that
postura,
help the government
qué
understand
nosotros
what we
queremos, cómo
need,
queremos la educación.
that we want bicultural and intercultural
intercultural.
education.
Entonces, desde esa postura,
With
cambia
this new
nuestro
strategy,
panorama
we now have 17
Nosotros
Awahun
tenemos ya un
congressional
indígena
representatives.
en el Congreso. Tenemos consejeros regionales,
We have national representatives from this region. We have mayors.
tenemos
This
alcaldes.
means that our strategy for fighting has
Eso hace
really
que realmente
changed.
cambie nuestra postura de lucha. Entonces,
We are seeking to
ahora lo que
engage in
estamos es
dialogue
ir al
before
diálogo
conflict
antes de llegar
ensues.
a este enfrentamiento. Desde un
We
principio
always
nosotros
wanted
quisimos el diálogo con el
dialogue,
Estado.
and the government listened
gobierno.
and accepted our
El gobierno no
terms.
escuchó. Llegó ese término. Entonces no queremos volver
We don't want to
a
go
ese
back
estado
to that state.
y por eso queremos el
We
diálogo.
want dialogue, and we
Y
want to
todas las
finish
conversaciones
all the
queremos agotar.
conversations.
Carta por acá, carta para allá, y congreso por aquí.
We send
Entonces,
letters
nos
back and
movemos
forth
bastante.
and attend Congress. We are moving
La vida
around
cuesta.
a lot.
La vida hay que amar.
Life has a cost.
La vida no se regala.
Life must be created.
Nosotros hemos
Life is
adquirido
not
una
given
vida,
away.
y entonces esa vida
We
hay
have
que cuidar,
acquired
y hay
life,
que
and so we
ejercer
must care for that life
que
and
esa
make
vida
sure
cumpla
that it
sus
fulfills
funciones
what it is
que Dios ha
meant
dispuesto,
for.
¿no? Y muchas veces no lo hacemos nosotros, los hombres vamos por otro camino,
Often
¿no?
we end up
Y
making
cometemos esos
mistakes,
errores de
becoming
atropello,
violent,
de
failing to
cometer
understand
violencia,
each other.
y llegamos
Life is
a no
not for
entendernos.
this.
Produce eso, ¿no?
Can I go back and ask you to tell me the story of what actually happened at the Devil's Curve?
Ah, ya. Bueno. La curva,
Le pido disculpas de hacer una pregunta difícil.
no,
Difficult, I know.
no es difícil,
No, it's not.
pero es doloroso.
No, it is not a difficult question, but it is painful.
Hay- Nosotros
We believe
enfrentamos
there were two sets
dos
of innocent
inocentes.
people. The police were
La
innocent,
policía
but they had to follow orders.
eran inocentes, pero tenía que cumplir una orden. El
The
pueblo Abajún,
Awahun people,
había dos grupos
there were two
Muy
groups of
inocentes.
very innocent people
no involucrados
who
en
were
el,
not
en el tema
involved in the
legislativo.
contested legislation.
La policía eran muy inocentes,
The police
pero
were
tenían que
innocent,
cumplir una orden.
but they had to follow an order.
Y los indígenas también
And
tenían
the
que cumplir una
indigenous
orden
people were
de
also
defender el
innocent,
territorio,
and they also had to follow an
Y
order to
tenían
defend
que-
our territory,
defender sus derechos,
our
defender nuestro
rights,
territorio,
our
nuestros
life.
derechos, la vida. Entonces,
So we
nos
fought.
enfrentamos,
But the
pero
truly responsible
los
people
verdaderos responsables
were in
estaban aquí
Lima.
en Lima. Alan García, el presidente
Alan Garcia, the president,
del gobierno de la República,
Mercedes, the minister of the
Interior,
Interior,
Mercedes Arauz, que
Mercedes
era de
Arauz,
Comercio,
who was the
algo así
Minister
de
of
importante,
Commerce,
que dio
who gave
consejos
important
que realmente
advice to
él
the
se
government
fastidiaba
about
y
these
derogaba los
laws.
decretos. Yuri Simon, el primer ministro,
Yehudi,
algunos
the prime minister,
congresistas
and
que se
some members of
habían
Congress
opuesto
who
de
opposed
de
repealing the
derogar los
offensive
decretos
laws.
legislativos. Entonces, yo estaba en Condorcanqui y
I wasn't
no tenía que
supposed to
haber
be
estado
in
en Bagua,
Bagua,
pero la gente de Condorcanqui estaban en Bagua, habían salido. Y
but
teníamos
people
que
were going there
abastecer
to supply the people in
esta gente
Bagua with food
con
and masato,
con masato. Masato es la yuca
a drink made from
bebida,
yucca.
Que lo preparas en masa, lo llevas y vas tomando, ¿no?
I was
Entonces yo
supposed to
tenía que coordinar
coordinate
con
with the
el-
leader in Bagua,
Con el dirigente
but as
que
often
estaba en
happens with
Bagua.
scheduling, it was hard to communicate
Entonces,
beforehand.
Muchas veces con la radio tú no puedes comunicarte así ampliamente.
I had to
Entonces,
go
yo
ahead
tuve que salir,
and leave with a
con
team
un
that
equipo
accompanied
me
me.
acompañaron.
I went there,
Estuve ese día,
and we handed
entregamos
out
los
the food,
víveres, regresé,
and I
al
was
día
ready to
siguiente yo regreso.
return,
Ya nos comunican que iban a
but they
desalojar.
had just been notified that they were
Y,
going to be forced out by
Bueno, en
the
ese momento
police.
pues dialogamos.
So I
Yo no
tried to
entré
talk to
en
them,
el diálogo,
along with
sino que
another
había
person in
otro
Bagua,
responsable en
who was
Bagua
responsible for
que tenía que
negotiating
llevar
with the
todo el diálogo,
police.
con el general que estaba encargado, ¿no? Pero ese
But at
momento
that
lo
point,
cambian al
they
general
changed the
y le ponen
general in
otro nuevo,
charge and put in a new general who did not
que no
know
conocíamos
us.
nosotros. Entonces el obispo vino al final, el monseñor de Jaén,
The
quiso
talks
dialogar y
collapsed.
se cerraron. Bueno, entonces yo no podía dejar a ellos.
There were people there from several other towns,
gente del
and when they
Marañón,
saw me, they asked if I would
todo
stay
ahí,
with
y
them.
entonces cuando me vieron a mí, ellos se alegraron de que yo estuviera con ellos, ¿no? Y entonces no podía abandonarlos.
could not
Entonces me
abandon
quedé
them.
esa noche.
So I stayed over that
Esa
night.
noche nos reunimos y determinamos qué hacemos. Y
That
evaluamos.
night, we met to decide what to do.
Corral Quemado estaba cerrado para que no pasen
We determined that several routes to the
campesinos
area had been
ronderos de
closed
Jaén.
off so that people from other towns could not get
El
to
reposo
us.
estaba cerrado para que no pasen de Vago Grande y de Vago Chica para que no pasen. Estaba cerrado. ¿Quiénes estaban
We wanted to
encerrados
know
nosotros?
why this was happening, and we went to the
vimos
top of Devil's Curve,
Que desde
where
la
we
altura
saw
de
the
la curva
police
del Diablo,
gathering,
vimos el
and
movimiento
we
de
were
la policía
informed
de
that
Illinois,
tomorrow they
cómo
would surely
tomaban
attack us.
parte
They were going to kill us.
estratégicamente. Entonces, la información con esto fue que mañana seguramente nos
There were
atacarían.
young Awahun with
Habrá
us,
ataque verdadero. Entonces, la evaluación era que ahí tiene que morir, nos iban a matar. Entonces,
who had
había
served with
ahí
the
jóvenes,
military,
habían Abajún que habían hecho su servicio militar,
and the Marines,
Abajún que había hecho su servicio en aviación, en la marina,
as well
que
as
habían
with the
estado en
special
fuerzas especiales,
forces.
y todos esos tipos que estaban ahí. Entonces, esto, 9 de la noche, a
At
nosotros
9 p.m., those who had military training
em,
took over the leadership.
nos quitan el cargo, como que toman como estado de facto todos los que habían hecho su servicio militar.
They took on the
Asumieron la
defense
defensa
of
del pueblo del
Devil's
diablo
Curve so that people could
para
get
que
out
realmente la
when we
gente
were
saliera
attacked.
en ese ataque, ¿no? O sea que tenía que abrirse para que la gente pueda salir, como sea. Preparar la
They prepared a
estrategia
strategy
de,
to
¿cómo se
open
llama?
up
De
2 routes so
enfrentarse,
that people could get out,
pero
and they
tenía que
organized a
abrir
strategy
para
for
que
conflict.
otras gentes puedan salir, ¿no? Y a todas maneras yo me quedé escuchando, conversando. Entonces un viejo,
I
una
remained
persona
with
mayor
them,
que acompañaba,
observing.
había muchos
Among the
uno de
many
ellos
elders who
dice,
were with us, one said,
hijos,
"Folks, blood is
aquí va a
going
haber
to spill
derramamiento
here."
de sangre. Yo he leído el celeste,
He had read our future in the
porque el Abahún
stars,
conoce la
since the
astrología.
Awahun are adept at
Entonces, yo he
astrology,
leído que ya está determinado nuestro destino.
and we accepted the
Entonces, si va a
fact
ser así,
that if it's going to be
tenemos que
this way, we have to face the conflict.
y si nos matan, que nos maten, pero ya enfrentados ya.
And
¿Qué
if they
vamos a
kill
decir
us,
nosotros cuando
they should
lleguemos
do
a la
so
zona?
with us defending
Nosotros no
ourselves.
matamos a nadie, no
What are we
recuperamos,
going to say
a
when we
nosotros nos han
return home?
diezmado, y
We didn't kill
nuestras
anybody?
mujeres,
We retreated
para
and
eso están viendo
fainted?
ustedes,
The
para que
women
hagan
would be
eso.
disappointed.
Es una vergüenza
It's
para un
shameful
Abahún
for Awahun
que
to
regrese
return defeated.
vencido. Entonces, el jaguar
When a
cuando
jaguar
muere
dies, it dies
en
fighting.
estado de
So,
vigilancia,
we had to fight.
en estado de ataque.
At that point,
Entonces,
someone
nosotros
with
tenemos que
military
enfrentar.
experience was elected to organize
Y
the
en ese
group,
momento,
and he
eliges a
brought
uno
together everyone
que-
who had served in the
que había
military
hecho
forces.
servicio militar en Milagro. Y entonces ese convoca y dice, ¿cuántos
The
licenciados
600
de
that were
servicio militar
assembled
tenemos?
were separated into groups.
Ejército, aviación, marina y de fuerzas especiales. Separaron y había 600 hombres de las 3 armas que habían determinado.
A
Y de
group
esos
of
600 se
sentinels.
divide
A group to
para la
plan the attack
vigilancia,
on the police.
cómo van a atacar a la
A
policía,
group assigned
cómo
to
iban a
disarm the
deter-
police,
a quitar su
since we
armamento,
did not have
porque nosotros no
firearms,
teníamos
only
lanza nomás,
spears, and a
y cómo lo
group
entreteníamos a la
charged with
policía.
planning how to
Pero para que
defuse the
disparen en el
aggression.
aire,
For
para que no den
example,
a-
to
¿cómo se llama?
distract
a la
them into
persona, ¿no?
shooting into the air
Tuvimos que
rather
preparar
than at people.
cohetes de
We planned to
fiestas,
light firecrackers,
dispararlos,
the kind that are used for
y ese cohete
parties,
pues alumbra
in order
y
to
deja
provide some
cubierto a la gente, ¿no?
visibility to
Entonces,
see the police
veríamos
positions
en qué
when they
posición se
fired
encontraba la
into the
policía.
air.
Y mientras tanto, la policía dispararía al aire, ¿no? Entonces, otra gente de fuerzas especiales tenía que arrastrarse,
The
tenía
group
que
that had served
rampar
in the special forces
para
were
llegar
to
cuerpo a
form a
cuerpo y
human
en ese momento
shield
herir a la
in
policía y
preparation
quitarles
for
el armamento.
confronting the police.
Entonces, tuvieron que reducir la lanza en medio metro, o medio metro chiquito,
So
sí,
we had to shorten the
suficiente
spears
como para
to a
apuñalar
half meter in length so that they would work for
efectivo. Entonces,
stabbing.
la cosa era arrebatarle su armamento. En ese momento de arrebatamiento de armamento, la policía empieza a
When the
herir,
police got agitated,
entonces,
they would begin to wound
motivo
us,
de que realmente
which would
ellos
mean that
habían
they were the
empezado a
ones
disparar,
to initiate
los
combat.
heridos somos nosotros, y entonces tuvimos que defendernos. Entonces ahí entraría en acción.
We were the ones who were wounded, and we would
Entonces,
have to defend
esa fue la estrategia
ourselves.
que preparan.
We had
Y
this strategy
11 de la
all
noche
worked out by
determinan
11
todo.
p.m.
Unos vigilaban. Bueno, la gente ahí, los restos de la gente estaban
So
tomando
some
macata,
people
unos
went on
como
night
unos
watch
105,
while the rest of us were
eh,
resting.
creyendo que no iba a haber ataque, ¿no? A 11 de la noche vienen, les dan orden cada grupo. Tengo que dormir porque nos
Drinking
van a atacar
Masato,
mañana.
since we did not
Cada-
expect them to attack us yet.
¿Cómo se llama?
At midnight,
a
the
ver.
order was given for people to sleep, since we expected
5
the
de la
attack to
mañana.
occur the next day.
Atacan. Y entonces ahí, tal como fue, dan el puesto de escucha, después el puesto de observación, dan a
The
la base
attack
donde nosotros
happened at
estábamos,
5 a.m.
que ya
The
habían
sentinels
detectado y
had
ya
already
habían
detected the
disparado
movement
cohetes
and begun to
como
light the
para alarmar,
firecrackers,
y
and
la
the
policía
police
empezó a disparar,
fired.
y ahí ya empezó a los primeros heridos. Entonces yo me desperté y tuve que caminar 500 metros yo,
I woke up and
para
moved away about
impedir de que
500
realmente
meters
no haya
to
muertes, ¿no?
try and avoid the
No estábamos
gunfire.
armados. En ese momento yo fui herido y a mí me regresan y
But I was
me
hit,
reportan
and my
a la zona
companions
de que
went back and reported
yo
that I had
había
fallen.
caído. Entonces, orden de la zona viniendo diciendo, ¿ustedes qué hacen? Si el dirigente cayó,
The reaction was
actúen,
that since the leader had
tal
fallen,
como fue
they
acordado.
had to take action.
Entonces, la radio, empezaron a comunicar, cerramos las radios, empaquetaron, entonces a enfrentarse. Ahí
They
empezaron a
communicated
disparar
by radio,
con sus propias
shut
armas
down
de
the
la policía,
communications, packed up,
y,
and prepared to fight.
disparan, matan y entonces ahí dejan al armamento, tienen que arrebatar otro armamento para
They
poder
fought with the
seguir
police
defendiéndose, ¿no?
in order
esa
to
forma
open up
abren
a route
el
so
camino
that
para
people
que
could
la
get
gente
out of Devil's
pueda
Curve.
salir de la curva del diablo. Uno
Two
hacia
groups began to exit,
Utubamba, que es Bagua
one
Grande,
towards
otro
Bagua Grande
hacia
and the other towards
Bagua Chica.
Bagua Chica.
Dos grupos tuvieron que salir. Y los
Those
que
that
quedaron
remained had to fight to the end.
tenían que luchar hasta
I
el
was
último.
transported to Bagua
Y,
and from there
yo
to
fui trasladado
Chiclayo, where they
a
operated
Bagua y
on
de
me.
Bagua a Chiclayo, donde me operaron. Tuve que estar ahí 6 meses y fui detenido. Aún así ahí.
I had to
ahí,
stay there for 6 months
y en mi
recovering,
cuarto, la
and I was
policía
under
afuera estaba
arrest,
vigilándome, otro
with
policía
8
diario.
policemen watching me
hasta 4
every day
meses.
in the hospital for 4
Después,
months.
después tuve que salir cuando me dieron la libertad de
After that, I
comparecencia
was allowed to
extranjera.
leave,
y
but
me
they
liberaron
revoked my
ahí,
privileges
pero
to
no
travel
puedo salir.
outside the
Eso es
country.
un momento
This
de
is a tragic
situación
situation.
trágico que sucedió, ¿no?
And you're now facing charges?
Sí,
Yes.
sí. Y eso no, los jueces
Because in
son
Peru,
mayor
most
parte
of the
apristas,
judges
¿no?
belong to
Perú
the APRA
se
party.
autoprotegen.
They protect
Entonces, en
themselves.
nuestro caso, está llevando SEAS, la Comisión
In our
Episcopal de
case,
Acción
we're
Social,
getting help from
está
human rights and
llevando
religious groups.
otros IDL, Instituto de Defensa Legal.
But despite all the
con todos
work
los
that has
sustentos
been
que se han
done,
dado,
the judges have still not
los
made a
jueces
determination.
no determina nuestra situación. Entonces,
We'll
aguardando
see
el
if this
documento.
year the case is resolved.
Y vamos a
We're
ver si
still
este año se
waiting.
soluciona el problema. Entonces, estamos en espera, ¿no? De alguna forma,
Peru
el
has to
Perú tiene
change.
que dar un
Sentiment
cambio
is increasingly
de esta
against them.
parte. Entonces,
And what's happened with the larger situation, with the oil exploration and all of that?
bueno, hemos avanzado, hemos ganado un punto,
We have won some issues,
pero otro
but
punto no
not
estamos
others.
ganándolo. Hay muchos intereses. Entonces, los decretos
There are a
legislativos
lot of
se han derogado.
interests. We were
eso
successful at
conseguimos
having 4 decree
4
laws
decretos
repealed.
legislativos. Después, en los puestos de gobierno, toda esa parte hemos ganado
And we
también
have gained
políticamente.
political
Eso está bien.
representation.
Lo
This
que
is
se
good.
trabajado en la mesa del
But the
diálogo
dialogue
no lo está
has not
llevando, no lo
always
aplica el
worked.
gobierno todavía. Entonces, ahora tenemos un problema con
Now we have a problem with
Morel-
Morel et
con
Prom, a
Morel et
French
Prom,
oil
que es una
consortium
empresa
that is
petrolera
in
francesa
Zone
del lote
116,
116
which
de
is
nuestro
our
territorio.
territory.
Y este año, el año 2013, Pacific Rubiales, que es
And
una
this
empresa
year,
canadiense, ha
2013,
entrado
Pacific
a ser
Rubiales,
¿cómo se
a
llama?
Canadian company,
Socio
has
con Morel et
joined
Prom
as a partner to
para la
explore and drill
perforación
in Zone
para la
116.
exploración de la zona 116.
The
Entonces,
government has not had
el
any
gobierno no ha hecho ninguna
consultation
consulta.
with us.
Yo sugerí a Pacific Rubiales,
I suggested to Morel et
cuando llegó
Prom
a
when they
la
came
zona,
to the zone
le
that
sugerí
we
que
have a
conversara,
dialogue
entremos
with
en
all
diálogo con
affected
73
73
comunidades
communities.
que están involucrados en el mapa. Ese diálogo era muy importante de que realmente haya aprobación
This dialogue is very
trabajos
important
que ellos
in order to assure that
tienen que
the
hacer
impact
esta
of drilling
perforación, el
is
impacto que
approved
debe
by the indigenous communities.
producirse. Entonces, parece ser que Morel Prom no hizo ningún diálogo, también el Pacific Rubiales.
But it appears
momento
that
estamos
there
en
is no
tensión.
dialogue. And
Ahora,
at this time,
están
relations
instalando
are
esta maquinaria
strained.
para la perforación.
They are installing equipment for
Entonces,
the
la gente
exploration.
está agotando los diálogos. Yo he venido aquí en Lima.
The talks have been
Yo le he
exhausted,
dicho
and I came
al
here to
responsable
Lima
peruano,
to
que es
meet with the
Carlos
Peruvian
Mora,
representative,
que conozco,
Carlos
lo conozco.
Mora, who I know,
Y
to
dice,
try to
bueno,
promote
Carlos,
further
para este diálogo.
dialogue.
Yo he ido a quien ha sido presidente, bueno, quien era
Apparently,
Beatriz,
the company is manipulating local
que
communities with
ahora está
small
en la
gifts
sociedad,
in order to
presidente
go
de la
in
sociedad
and begin
de hidrocarburos,
exploring.
hablándole de que realmente la empresa está
The company
manipulando a
has
las
not started
comunidades
drilling yet.
para que realmente con unos regalitos entren a empezar a trabajar. Y lo estamos aguantándolo. ¿Hasta dónde nosotros podemos
As
llegar
long
a
as I
diálogo?
am here for health reasons, I
Este
am going to
momento, la
propose to
empresa
them that we have
no ha
a
entrado
general
y ahora
assembly
yo,
of the
este momento que estaba
73
acá, le digo, mira, Carlos,
communities,
estoy delicado de
and
salud.
that this dialogue
Te voy a
continue
proponerte de que
in a
yo pueda
permanent form.
convocar una asamblea general de 73 comunidades, 7 organizaciones y de la Comisión Especial Permanente, para que adelante
And if the
ustedes
communities decide
esa
to
gente
approve the work of these
apruebe
companies,
realmente la exploración.
we will
Y
accept
si esa
that.
gente dice que hay que trabajar con la empresa, nosotros volteemos la cara. Hay que asegurarnos hasta qué punto ustedes van a sincerarse. Si ustedes son transparentes, ustedes no deben tener
If they are
miedo
going
de
to be
una reunión.
transparent, they
Cuando
should not be
ustedes
afraid
huyen
of
de esta
meeting with
reunión,
us.
es porque ustedes,
When you avoid meeting with
ustedes no
us,
existen.
there is no transparency.
Entonces,
We don't
no
want
queremos
any
otras
parallel
reuniones paralelas.
processes.
Y si realmente esta segunda vez que voy a convocar fracaso, así como Morel et Prom,
If we
hizo
convene
una
a
reunión
second
paralela
meeting
aquella
that
vez y
fails because
fastidió
the
nuestra
company
reunión,
sponsors a parallel meeting, negotiations will
nosotros
again be
recriminamos un poco.
paralyzed.
La empresa petrolera, ¿cómo se llama? Pacific Rubiales, no ha hecho
The
ningún
Morel et
convenio
Prom
con-
company
ningún trato
has
con el
not
pueblo
entered
amazónico.
into any contracts with the
Allá
communities.
ustedes con el gobierno.
The
El
government
gobierno no
has
ha hecho
not
ningún
held
proceso,
any
ningún proceso de consulta.
consultations.
Por lo tanto, aquí hay un gato encerrado y vamos a determinar qué es lo que vamos a hacer con ustedes. Entonces, eso es lo que yo le he dado a Carlos Mora.
This
acá,
is what I will be
Pacific
telling
Rubiales, en este
Carlos
momento
Mora here.
están instalándose los materiales, toda esa parte, ¿no? Y el pueblo me exige a ver cuándo. ¿Cuándo ponemos una
The
demanda? Entonces,
company
hay dos
is
puntos que vamos
already
a hacer.
bringing in equipment. So let's
Demandar
see
al
when we
Estado
can
peruano
meet. There are
ante los
two
tribunales
things we are
constitucionales.
doing.
Y entonces sobre haber
First,
alterado la
we will
derecho de
sue
los
the
indígenas,
Peruvian
la ley de la
state in the
consulta, toda esa parte,
Constitutional
no lo he
Tribunal
hecho, pero le he dado
for
permiso
failing
para
to
que
follow the law on consultations with
Entonces,
indigenous communities.
estamos esperando pues de que realmente ellos
The
respondan
court
documentos
has to
para
give us
poder
permission.
entrar en
Right
acción
now, we are waiting
de
for them to
demanda
respond with documents so that we can bring the
nivel legal
lawsuit
con el-
against the
con el Estado
Peruvian
peruano.
state.
y a nivel
Secondly,
de
with regard to
empresa,
the company,
si nosotros fracasamos
if
el
the
diálogo,
dialogue
lo
fails,
echamos de la zona
we
ya.
will kick them
O sea
out.
que, llévese
They
todas
will
sus
have to
maquinarias,
take all their machinery
a las
out,
buenas o a las malas.
one way or another.
Nosotros no queremos lamentar como otros pueblos del río Corrientes, como
We
los
don't
Achuares,
want to be
con
sorry
Perecos,
later,
con
like
Plumperos,
other
toda esa parte que
communities
después
in Rio
tienen todo un
Corrientes,
problema de
like the
contaminación
Achuares,
y
whose
de
territory
enfermedades-
is
de
now
enferm-
polluted
de
and who are
enfermedades
suffering
raras,
from unusual
y que
illnesses
realmente
because
quiera
the
fastidiar a
area
nosotros.
is very
Y antes
damaged.
de que realmente entre la explotación, Y antes de que se termine la
So
exploración,
before they begin,
nosotros vamos a
and
exigir, si
before they
fracasamos
finish
el
the
diálogo,
exploration,
de que realmente
if the
vayan
dialogue
por la zona.
fails, we will
Y si se
insist
resisten,
that they leave the zone.
tú
If
conoces
they
al chancho, ¿no?
refuse,
Al cerdo.
well, you know what to do
¿Qué
with
hace
a pig
cuando,
that is
cuando
stubborn.
el cerdo no
You
hace caso?
force
Tienes
it
que
to
amarrarle
move.
y aunque grite, tienes que
That's how
empujarlo,
it
pues,
works
sacarlo
with
fuera, ¿no?
animals.
Eso es que se hace con un animal. Yo pienso que la empresa
I
está
think the
formada de
company is
personas
run by
muy
very
intelectuales, muy
intelligent,
preparados,
well-educated people who
y
should not
no un
act
grupo
like a
de
group
cerdos,
of
¿no?
pigs.
Entonces, por lo tanto, ellos conscientes deben hacer caso el diálogo, que es importante. Determinar
They
que si
need
van
to
a
be
la
conscious
asamblea
of the
determina
dialogue.
que hay que trabajar con la
They have
empresa,
to work
hay
with
que
us
trabajar
sincerely
sinceramente cómo
and
vamos
be
a trabajar,
clear
qué
about
beneficios se
how
van a
they are
recibir,
going to work,
cómo se va a asegurar el
what
impacto.
benefits will be provided to the communities,
A nivel de aranceles internacionales, lo que se existe
how
fuera de
they
los
are going
cánones.
to guarantee
El pueblo
the
abogado nos
impact
dice
will
qué es
meet
lo que se podría hacer.
international
Entonces,
standards.
se podría trabajar
So,
en
we can
en
work
un
together
plano
on a
positivo
positive level if we can
si
engage in dialogue
entramos a dialogar
and reach
y
an
llegamos a
understanding.
comprendernos. Pero si no llegamos a comprendernos, ¿para qué
But
vamos a
if we
trabajar
have
si
no
realmente
mutual
después
understanding,
ellos no van a
why should we
cumplir
work with
con la
them?
contaminación que nos van a crear? Entonces es preferible
If
que no
then they are
trabajen y
not
se
going to
vayan.
comply and
Tendrá
end up
algún día
polluting
alguna
our
empresa
land?
que tendrá que ser consciente en los trabajos y tendrá que asegurar la, ¿cómo se llama?
We are hoping for a company
No
that
dañar
will
la
have
naturaleza,
dialogue
la
with
ecología,
us
el ambiente, toda esa parte, ¿no? Hoy en día se asegura toda
and
esa
will
parte.
explore
Eso es lo que en
responsibly
este momento
without
estamos
polluting.
tratando de
This
llegar
is what we are trying to
con la
achieve now.
empresa.
No Chevron Toxico.
Sí, sí, nosotros tenemos
Indeed, the company has to
conocimiento de que realmente
guarantee
la empresa
that there
no
will be
asegura, pues, yo sé
no
que el
harm to
daño
the
de todas maneras lo va
environment.
a producir.
If their
Entonces, si la
sincerity
sinceridad y
and
la
transparency are not
transparencia de la
convincing,
empresa
then it
no
is not
cuaja,
good for
entonces
us.
a nosotros no nos conviene.
You said you had your own understanding of development. Can you say a little more about that?
Bueno, yo entiendo que el desarrollo nace con la persona humana.
Well, I think that
La persona
development
es muy
begins
importante, la
with
familia y
personhood.
los hijos. Entonces, hay que trabajar con esa persona.
People are very
persona
important, the family
Y es
and
núcleo de
children.
familia,
So it is
y
important to
de
work
esos
with the
núcleos
person
forman el clan.
and the nucleus of the
De
family
esos clanes
and
se
the
forman lo que
families
es la
that form the
comunidad y la
clan
sociedad, ¿no?
and the clans that
Que van
together
expandiéndose.
make
Entonces,
up communities and
el
society.
desarrollo humano es que esa familia, volviéndose a hablar del
So human
desarrollo,
development
perdón,
with these
volviéndose a hablar
families,
del buen
going
vivir,
back to the concept of
hay un
buen
tipo de
vivir,
desarrollo
the idea
que uno
of
debe
living
encontrar
in
un
harmony
equilibrio.
with nature, there is a type of
La educación es muy
development
importante.
that tends to promote
Hay que
balance.
trabajar la educación
Education is
de
very
hoy en día en
important.
ambos lados, ¿no? La educación ancestral nuestra y la educación de hoy en día. Por eso
That is why
somos
we promote
bilingües.
education in our
Es muy
own
importante.
tradition as
Entonces,
well as
la
modern
educación
education.
hace de que realmente
That is why we
el
are
hombre se
bilingual.
desarrolle,
Education is
se
fundamental to
desarrolle
development
integralmente.
because it provides
No nos
comprehensive
conviene
development.
desarrollar
We
en una
don't
parte,
want partial
sino
development.
que tiene que
We
ser
want
un
holistic
desarrollo integral.
development.
Una identidad fuerte, ¿ah? Con su espiritualidad propia,
A whole person has a
O sea que si
strong
yo
identity with
soy
his own
cristiano,
spirituality,
si soy
so that
católico,
if I'm a Christian,
esa
a Catholic, that spirituality has to be my own, not what the missionaries brought from Spain.
no tiene que ser un Cristo español.
It can't be a Spanish Christ, but an Awahun Christ with Awahun
Con
principles.
principio Abajún. Así como en nuestros antepasados, el Ajotap
Just like for our ancestors, their God spoke to them. Christ has to speak to contemporary
Jesús
Awahun.
debe hablarnos a nosotros hoy en día, no con un término
It cannot be an alienating, Hispanicized dominant religion.
¿cómo se llama? Tipo dominante. No, nosotros tenemos que ser libres.
We have to
Entonces,
be
el
free.
desarrollo
Freedom
también
is
va con la
also
libertad,
critical to
que es muy
development.
Entonces, nosotros, el Abajún, el pueblo Abajún Mapis, debe seguir a un
The
Dios
Awahun
vivo,
people should be able to follow a God freely, without any pressure.
De esa forma, vemos que realmente Dios, que es el Ajota verdadero,
We understand that the true God, the Hota of our ancestors, was embraced freely.
Y entonces, eso es el desarrollo humano. Y la familia es muy
This
importante.
is human
Fuera de
development,
eso, todo eso
and
puedes tener
family
económicamente,
is
puedes tener una
also
casa, puedes
very
tener una chacra, todo.
important.
Puedes tenerlo, eso no
Outside of that,
Lo que importa
you
es
can have whatever you want.
uno que tenga una fuerte identidad, con su
A house,
constitución,
everything.
con su
It doesn't
propia
matter.
identidad,
What
y
matters
realmente
is
lo haga
people,
suyo,
that they have a strong
modo de
identity
vivir.
with their own
Yo no
spirituality,
vengo aquí en Lima y no voy a seguir el Dios de los
their
limeños.
own identity, and that they make it
Yo
their
tengo
own.
mi principio. Cristo se adapta
When
de
I
acuerdo a
come
la
here to
cultura
Lima, I am not going
un
to
pueblo.
follow the God of the people
y en
of
eso
Lima.
adaptarlo.
I have my own
Entonces, ese
principles
Jesús
that are
ya viene
adapted in
en un
accordance with the
concepto
culture
de
of a
ideología
people.
aún.
Therefore, Christ
Entonces,
lives in
de
our
ahí, el
experience.
motor que hay que hacer
This is our
felicidad
concept
para que
of
el hombre tenga el
development.
desarrollo.
As he was speaking, I was thinking spirituality is the way you live.
Ujú.
Para nosotros la espiritualidad es muy importante.
Spirituality is very important for us. Without the spirituality, humans are lost in the world.
Está perdido en el mundo, ¿no? La espiritualidad guía al hombre.
It is a strong spirituality with a strong identity, which is how our people resist, struggle, develop, and continue to be strong.
Lucha, desarrolla y sigue siendo fuerte. Por eso
That's
es-
why it's very significant to me to work on training new leaders so that there is continuity in this belief that you are a person,
para que permanezca ese
that you are part of a culture,
de uno mismo, de que tú eres
and
una
that this
persona,
culture is what supports you
y esa cultura es lo que realmente a ti te
to
eleva
find whatever
a
type
buscar
of
cualquier
development
tipo de
suits you.
desarrollo que tú puedes ponerlo, ¿no?
I think two last questions. One is, do you have any restrictions you would want to tell us about in the way we use what you've said? Are you happy with us showing it wherever we can?
No tengo ninguna limitación.
No
hay problema.
problem.
And is there anything that I have not asked that you think should be part of this discussion?
Bueno, yo, la gente cree que
Although I am referred to as the leader of the Awahun, this is not exactly
en
right,
realidad la gente se equivoca que
because
yo
I
no
am
soy
better
el Dios.
thought of as a servant of my
Yo
people.
soy más bien el esclavo de mi pueblo. Estoy al servicio de
I'm
mi
the
pueblo.
person who carries the message of my people to outside institutions, to the government, and other organizations.
El mensaje de mi pueblo a diferentes instituciones, a nivel de gobierno, a nivel de otros
I am the
grupos,
spokesperson for my
la voz de
people.
mi pueblo, ¿no?
I have never felt like a leader, because
Nunca me he
that for
sentido,
me means the person who gives
dirigente, porque
orders.
dirigente es, para mí, pues, es el que manda, ¿no? Yo no mando. A mí me mandan a cumplir.
I don't give orders,
Entonces,
I follow them.
yo siempre he
I have
dicho que
always said
estoy
that I am
al
at the
ser humano
service of
al servicio
others.
de los demás. Entonces, eso es mi manera de entender, de concebir el servicio que yo doy.
This
La
is
formación
my
que me
way
han
of
dado,
thinking of this service.
Me han dado
The
gratis,
education and
me han
training that I
formado, y
received,
esa formación lo tengo
I have to
transferir
pass on to others,
a
so
otras
that there
personas,
are others who can
como
serve
yo
the
conozco
people.
otros también que se pongan al servicio de nuestro pueblo, ¿no? Eso es ¿cómo se llama?
This is important
Lo
to
que trato de
correct.
corregir,
I am not the leader,
porque,
but actually, I am below the leadership
dirigente,
because
pues, es lo
I
que
listen
mandas
to my
cuando
people.
gobiernas, y ese es eso. Yo estoy por debajo de esos dirigentes porque a mi pueblo yo los escucho.
So, with the internal consultation that I have with the people, I want to emphasize that it is important that both the people and the company must be sincere.
¿Van a trabajar o no van a trabajar? Y si van a trabajar, muy bien. Yo, esclavo, me pongo a su servicio. ¿Cómo vamos a trabajar? Y si no van a trabajar,
are you going to work or not? If you are, then I am at your service. If not, then I am not. This is what I make clear.
I think you are a brave man and a wonderful voice, and it's an honor to meet you.
Gracias, gracias.
Santiago Manuin's terrible story is only a recent example of the European oppression of the indigenous people of the Americas, which stretches back for 500 years. It's a reminder that those who disregard the rights of indigenous people and their relationship with the land are playing with fire. As Santiago says, if you back a cat into the corner, he will fight ferociously. We who are immigrants in these lands need to find a new, mature, and respectful relationship with our Aboriginal brothers and sisters and with the natural world that sustains us all. Without that, we will all be ruined people in a ruined land. For the Green Interview, I'm Silver Donald Cameron.